Welcome to TGCon Live, everyone. I see people starting to trickle in. I do want to give you a couple of housekeeping tips. For the best viewing experience, we recommend that you use theater mode. The theater mode button is found on your page, and this will allow you to have access to the polls and the chat and the presentation all on one screen. If you do experience any audio or video issues, please click the support tab in the top right of your screen and then select Get Help. This will shoot out an email to our support team. They've been very on it today, so if you do have any issues, please reach out to them. Next, I'd like to direct your attention to the chat box on the right side of the main screen. Please use this function to type in any questions for our panelists, and we will go through about as many of these as we can as at the end of the roundtable discussion. Please also take the time to fill out the poll questions, which can be found in the poll tab next to the chat function. And then after the session, we would appreciate it if you took time to fill out the session survey using the link found below the presentation information. So I know there's a lot going on that page. All of those links can be found for you there. But again, reach out to us if you're having any issues with any of that. So let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to today's roundtable, Brand Owners and Co-Mans. I have the pleasure of introducing our fantastic moderator, Susan Mayer. She's an innovation advisor with RTI Innovation Advisors. So Susan, please take us away.
And welcome everyone to this discussion. We've got terrific panelists who are looking forward to sharing their experiences, brand owners and co-manufacturers with you. As Rachel said, I'm Susan Mayer. I'm your moderator for today. With RTI Innovation Advisors, we provide a wide range of innovation services to companies and organizations, both in food industry, as well as other industries. Prior to RTI, I spent several years working in product development and commercialization for several food companies across a wide range of product categories. I'm a certified food scientist, so I spent lots of shifts in co-manufacturing plants as well as company-owned factories. And with innovation advisors, we often work with our clients to identify the right co-man partner. So I'm a little familiar with this field, but not like our speakers are. So let's just take a couple moments and ask our speakers to introduce themselves so you know a little more about them before we start. Alice, would you like to start with the introductions?
Sure. My name is Alice Anderson. I am a Senior Director of Food Safety and Quality at Fresca Foods in Louisville, Colorado. Prior to coming on board about 3.5 years ago with Fresca, I managed quality programs at Quiznos, Stephen Roberts Original Desserts, and Cooper Tea. I originally started out as a microbiologist and worked on the bench for a number of years in the food industry.
Thank you, Alice. And Lindsay?
My name is Lindsay Copley. I work for the J.M. Smucker Company. I specialize in supply quality. I work on both our human food as well as pet food side of the business, and I also do quite a bit with co-packers, and I've done some with packaging suppliers as well.
Great, thank you. And Kevin?
Hello everyone, Kevin Mccaffery here. I've been a service provider to the food and beverage industry for 12, 13 years now. Worked previously for some large technology companies, Oracle, NetSuite, Microsoft. I've also been exclusively focused on the food and beverage industry. So worked for Conagra Foods, for Cargill, now a natural fit for Trace Gaines. Happy to be here today, excited to get into the content.
Great, thanks so much. So just once again, before we start, in case some folks came in late, we do plan on having some time at the end to answer your questions. So please go ahead and use that Q&A function on your screen. Type questions whenever you think of them, and Rachel will share them with us a bit later. And please also take the poll that's in there. That'll help us understand who's in the audience, and we can tailor our responses based on the folks in the audience in the background. So let's get started. You know, in the food and dietary supplement industries, we see an often unavoidable friction between suppliers and manufacturers. They haggle over price, over specs, delivery time, quality, chargebacks. But the rules for these players on each side of these transactions is pretty clear. One side sells a raw material and the other uses it to manufacture a product. The roles and responsibilities for implementing and documenting GMPs, food safety, regulatory compliance are all pretty clear. The common relationship we're going to talk about today is between the brand owner and the co-manufacturer, also called a co-packer. In this business relationship, you would think it's more collaborative because the partners are working together to produce a consumer product, right? Or are there many more points of contention, or shall we say negotiation, between these two supply chain partners, which tempers that relationship? We know roles and responsibilities for documenting GMPs and food safety, regulatory compliance. It can be a bit murky, and that murkiness can lead to misunderstandings, errors, frustrations, and non-compliances. So our panel today, as you heard, represents both sides of this brand owner and co-packer relationship. They share a common goal of supply chain transparency and meeting food safety standards. So let's dive into this discussion and see if we can find some common pitfalls to reaching that common goal, and see if we can encourage our panelists to reveal some of their tips on how best to work together. So Alice, if I could start with you, can you tell us about Fresca Food and the challenges you face as a co-manufacturer around defining those roles with brand managers?
Yes, let me start with a brief summary of Fresca. We're a turnkey innovation, supply chain, and manufacturing partner to category leading brands in some of the world's largest companies. Our company has decades of large-scale food industry experience with some entrepreneurial know-how. We have a history of manufacturing that started with pizza and ice cream, nut butters, salsa, and meat starters, but we evolved eventually into the ready-to-eat snack food category. Currently, we produce cereal and granola, cookies, salty, crispy snacks, extruded bars, and a pet supplement. And these are all made with simple, natural ingredients. One of the looming challenges that we have is defining a role with the brand owner. And that is who owns or manages the raw materials, the process, and the equipment. We work with some CPGs that will want to control the whole supply chain. They'll want to control the equipment and the process and the formula. And then we charge back a toll fee for manufacturing the product under our food safety and quality plan. Other brands that want to work with Fresca will want us to manage everything completely within our food safety plan. And still others will want to partner on our raw materials, our equipment, and our process. And they'll want to leverage their purchases and provide some expertise in development and into commercialization.
Sounds like those defining roles is really a key challenge, especially when you have a wide range of brand owners. Lindsay, when does Smucker's look to co-mans, and how do you view your role, maybe differently from Alice's view?
Sure. So actually kind of similar to what Alice shared, our approach to managing that role with the co-man really varies. It's a bit of a balancing act between proprietary formula management, co-packer capability, as well as the risk of the raw materials or the finished product itself. For us and our company, we are a manufacturer as well as a brand owner of quite a few brands in consumer, coffee, as well as pet food and treats. So we are always looking to create the next big thing, the next most loved Smucker product. And in some cases, we do that innovation and production within our own network. And in other cases, we would look to our co-pack or co-manufacturing partners for their expertise, their manufacturing capability, or just their production capacity. We might also use co-man partners to help us manage our costs or production capacity while balancing logistical challenges to ensure that our customers have our products whenever or wherever they may be.
when we look at these different types of brand owners, Alice, do you see that the entrepreneurial brand owners and and as compared to like the large established brand owners, do they have different expectations around supply chain transparency? So, ingredient, finished product, like food safety and food quality documentation?
Yes, they certainly do. The large CPGs are generally very current and very knowledgeable on the industry and on regulatory food safety and quality standards. They actually expect Fresca to meet or exceed their standards, and they often want to leverage their capabilities with their established supply chains to our advantage. However, this does lead to some challenges with the brand owners if they control the supplies, and that might be the inability to communicate directly with our suppliers. Sometimes we received a boiled down specification from the brand owner that may not satisfy Fresca's approved supplier program. Sometimes there's a lack of access to all the food safety documents. And sometimes the suppliers are pre-selected by our customer, and they may not meet all the challenges that we have with certifications, such as the organic or kosher or gluten-free. The entrepreneurial owners often have less resources and less experience dealing with food safety and quality regs and industry standards, but that's not always true. But when they do, they rely heavily on our expertise and our quick turnaround. And we are able to provide raw materials from approved suppliers quickly with our partnership with Trace Gaines. And this helps us innovate and commercialize their ideas and products quickly. So that the challenges with the entrepreneurial owner is sometimes ambiguity on the finished product spec. They may not have a complete spec to work from, or they change it continuously in the process. But that doesn't really bother us because we're able to pivot quickly, and we can find the supplier quickly through the Trace Gaines portal.
Great. So let's look at a more of a maybe real life example. So let's say that you two are working together on a Smucker's product, and FDA asks about a hazard analysis for that product. Lindsay, what's it like responding to the FDA for a product that's produced by a co-man?
Sure. So we actually have a policy in place at Smucker's that if the FDA were to stop in, that the co-packer should notify us of that. I know some co-packers may only notify us if they are actually running our product. Others may notify us just because we're a customer of theirs. As far as the hazard analysis goes, the co-manufacturers, they are responsible for their own hazard analysis. So they should have that available and ready for the FDA. We don't own the hazard analysis for them, but we do review it. So we do often stop by the co-packer on an annual basis to check in with them and make sure all is well. And the hazard analysis is something that we would review at that point to make sure it's up to our own expectations, as well as consistent with our own internal hazard analysis.
So Trace Gaines can add value in ways that can improve the working relationship between brand owners and co-mans. So I'd like to ask each of you to expand a little on that thought and perhaps give examples that you can share on that. Kevin, can I start with you?
Sure, absolutely. There's a lot of different ways that the co-manufacturer and those brands can communicate in the way that Trace Gaines can help bridge that gap. There have been several examples just mentioned in this conversation about ambiguity around a fully finished formula and specifications. We even talk a lot about the supplier approval program. So that would be a very common example. So let's take, for instance, the co-manufacturer. They already have these pre-approved suppliers and level of comfort relationships that they're working with, and maybe they want to make a suggestion to their customer, to the brand manufacturer and the owner. Hey, we use these guys for sugar and salt or honey, and we feel that they're reliable, they have a good product, they commonly meet the specification, we haven't had a lot of corrective actions. Why don't you check these guys out? And through the Trace Gains network, the brand owner or even that entrepreneur has the ability to do some window shopping and look at that supplier as potentially on board, see what documents they have available, drill down into some of those specifications. That would be one common way that we'd help bridge that level of communication between the two parties. We also, yes, so dictating vendors, also with specifications. So if you want to collaborate and be able to share back and forth, those are a couple common examples that I would say. I mean, there are quite a bit, but I'd welcome that with the rest of the group here to see what other examples we can come up with. But those are pretty common that we see from the Trace Gains end.
Great, thank you. Lindsay, you're on mute. There we go. Do you have some maybe expanding on that thought of that relationship, working relationship, and how Trace Gains adds some value?
Yeah, so we are actually currently in the process of trialing something new in Trace Gains, where we are actually setting up our co-packers as suppliers within the network. So we would connect with them in the same way that we would a supplier and request some documentation. Being that we are the brand owner and the onus of the hazard analysis and those types of things, we do leave that on the co-packer. Usually we have a more narrowed down list of documents we would expect from our co-packers, suppliers, and ingredients compared to what we would internal. But we are kind of leveraging that in a way to keep everyone on the same page, make sure everything is up to date and in line and consistent.
Great. And Alice? Oh, you're on mute.
Darn old mute anyway. One of the things that we have done recently is introduce a new pet supplement, and that was a challenge. We needed to source some new exotic ingredients and something with some good nutritional value for this product. We also needed to know that there were multiple suppliers possibly of this ingredient out there because, you know, there weren't a lot of suppliers producing it. So that was really helpful to have Trace Gains and their partnership and the market hub available to us to be able to provide that information to our customer quickly.
Great examples. So talk a bit about the transparency and food safety in the supply chain. If we could, to sort of wrap up this part of it, any advice? Oh, wait a minute. You know what? I got another question I want to ask you. We did talk about this value of the supply chain transparency, but let's now talk a little more about any other examples for innovation or improving a product? Can you give us some examples of some different examples of how your supply chain partner actually helped you improve or innovate a product? Alice or Lindsay?
Sure, I can start.
Thank you.
For us, as we all probably know, the supply chain can be kind of tricky when it comes to ingredients. Sometimes for unknown reasons, we could have trouble procuring an ingredient that we had previous consistent supply on. So a lot of times we would work with the co-packer to switch those things up in order to meet our production needs or drive cost savings, increase efficiency for any number of reasons. So in one particular case, we were working with one of our co-manufacturers who produces a biscuit-style dog treat for us. And the co-man actually found an alternate supplier who could deliver a similar ingredient for us. But not only just a similar ingredient that would work, but they also found this ingredient at a lower cost, and it actually increased the quality of our product. So the finished treat itself had a better color, and the biscuit itself tended to crumble quite a bit less.
Well, that's a trifecta, right?
Yeah.
Don't get those too often, but they sure are nice when they happen.
Yeah.
Kevin or Alice, other examples of where the supply chain partner actually helped more from an innovation or product improvement perspective?
So I echo a lot of what Lindsay said. We're always trying to reduce costs. So if we can find things that are more reasonable, we will certainly bring that up with our um, customers. But there are other ways that we've also worked with them. They sometimes have provided us with equipment that they are very familiar with, and it allows us to produce more efficiently. We've also joint ventured with them on food quality lab testing and on market testing, consumer focus groups, things like that, so that we have more information about the product that we want to produce for them.
Great. Kevin, do you have any examples that you can share with us where that a supply chain partner actually helped with an innovation or a product improvement?
Yeah, absolutely. I would want to emphasize how a supply chain partner using our Trace Gains network has the ability to access all these different suppliers and items from 100 different countries. There's about 250,000 unique items that can be searched literally around the world. And what does that mean from an R&D perspective? So when we talk about accelerating and bringing these new products to market, I think for those of you that are attending the conference, you're going to hear a lot about this tomorrow from our CEO, Gary Nowacki, who will be speaking about networked product development. But think about it this way. If we have a digital connection to our suppliers, and we have the ability to easily collaborate and agree on specifications, and we're sharing that same data, that is a tremendous accelerant when you're trying to get a new product to market. So we're trying to give our customers not only a faster experience collaborating through this network and using those supply chain partners, but also you get more bats at the plates and more opportunities to bring those products, because time is a big cost when you're trying to focus on R&D. So we've actually seen a lot of our customers benefit from that supply chain partner and that ability to communicate when they're bringing those new products to market. So more on that later. I don't want to jump too far into that, but that would be one fantastic way that we see a lot of innovation and ways to improve that relationship.
Yep, great. You know, as you said, with that ability to share information, the more ways you can do that and use it in more aspects of the development process and innovation process is great. So we've done a good job of looking at the supply chain partnership from all different angles. So to wrap this up, part of this discussion, what advice do you have that you could offer our audience on improving transparency and food safety in this supply chain relationship between co-mans and brand owners? Alice, can I start with you? You're on mute. Alice, you're on mute.
Mute again. Okay. The first thing you need to do is really be willing to have a conversation with your brand owners. You want to know who's owning what, understand their supply chain approval and compliance program. You want to go out and recognize the gaps between the brand owner and your supplier program as well, and address those with that brand owner. One of the things you want to find out too is what documents or information you will receive as the co-manufacturer, and then what raw materials or supplier questions must be answered during an FDA audit, for instance. I think Lindsay mentioned this earlier, but we've had FDA walk in and we want to be able to hop on the phone or send a text or something to our brand owner saying, hey, we got FDA in the building, we need you on, to be able to answer questions quickly or provide a document on the spur of the moment. And so we want to know, do we have that access, and who do we contact? And those are all important, as well as what type of warehousing they might have if they're handling all the ingredients and the process itself. So that's the main things. One of the other things we discovered is some brand owners don't understand the difference between scaling up a small batch versus a full-blown production. And sometimes you need to pivot and change quickly going into full-scale production with ingredients or processes. And with all of that may mean that you don't have the particular certificate you want, say a kosher certificate or an organic certificate. So by working with Trace Gains and this supplier program, we improve our opportunities for these successful launches and providing this information and pivoting quickly. So always obtain clarity on your finished product spec too. That'll save you a lot of grief in the end.
Great, thank you. And Lindsay?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what Alice said there. We strongly would recommend establishing a good working relationship with your co-packer. We have quite a few different dedicated teams here at Smucker who work hand in hand with our co-mans and provide assistance in areas where they might need it. So our teams are well versed with the co-packers' capabilities, such as what they can handle with volume, equipment, types of products that they can make, or how well they might follow their procedures. The other thing I would say, in addition to a good working relationship, is that we like to work with co-packers who are really capable of managing their supply chain, both for the raw materials that they used in our products as well as for those of other customers. And the reason for that would be that all materials that co-packer might buy and the suppliers who they may bring in have a potential to cause an issue for our product. So we do tend to get kind of concerned if the co-manufacturer strictly relies on us solely to approve the suppliers and the raw materials on their behalf without having any sort of their own oversight.
Great, thank you. And Kevin, any last thoughts from you on improving transparency in this supply chain relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a couple of thoughts, and a lot of what I heard before about having a successful launch and managing the supply chain and that level of communication. I would encourage the attendees to play this forward for a moment. Beyond that initial honeymoon phase of when me as the brand manufacturer or as an entrepreneur, I'm working with my co-manufacturer and I have all these different criteria and expectations that have to be met on the front end for us to begin to do business together. Well, what happens 6 to 12 months down the road? What does the support look like? So when are there issues? Am I getting a response and in a reasonable amount of time? What does my relationship look like with that support team and that resource? Do I feel like I'm being taken care of? Or do I have to chase somebody down in order to resolve some of those challenges? And along that note, I would also encourage people to start talking to their co-manufacturers about technology. And what exactly do I mean by that? What are the systems that you're currently using today to manage your supply chain and those vendors, to respond to customer inquiries? And a lot of it just has to do with maybe inventory reporting. So how much inventory do I, as the entrepreneur, have in your facility? When does it make sense to go and buy more packaging so we can keep the supply chain going? A lot of that information, that data, is so critical when making a meaningful business decision, especially at that entrepreneur's level when their capital is very tight and they want to have very strict management of their dollars being spent on raw goods and raw materials. That information matters. So I would ask the co-manufacturers, how sharp are you in getting back to me, but what are the technology and tools that this information is accurate and will help me make a meaningful business decision in a timely manner?
Great. Alice, do you ever find that people come to you because they know someone who is already manufacturing in your facility as another brand owner? Do you get references that way?
I'm not quite sure if that happens. I know that we have had a lot of companies come to us, especially in the last couple years, wanting us to help develop or produce products for them. So word is getting out by some method. I'm not sure. Probably somebody more in the marketing side could answer that question better than I, but I know that we are turning people away at the door.
Yeah, what Kevin's comment about, make sure the people are doing a good job and are, reliable, have a good relationship down the line. It's, while you don't want to ask your competitor, where are they going, right? It's sort of, who do you know in the industry you can get a good reference, ingredient suppliers, whatever. Lindsay, anything else to add?
No, I think Alice captured that really well.
Well, thank you, Alice and Lindsay and Kevin, for your insights today. And thank you also to our audience for joining us, and especially to Trace Gaines for hosting this session as part of TGCon. We do, as promised, have a few minutes, so we'd like to take some questions. Rachel, do you have some questions to share with us?
I do, and I just want to echo Susan's thanks. That was a great discussion. We do have some questions that have come in, but I also invite you to ask more questions in the chat function, and we will get through as many of them as we can.
And Rachel, before we start, can we access the poll results so we have an idea of who's in our audience?
I will share those with you, yes. I'm going to go ahead and ask this first question, though. So James wants to know, and this is directed to you, Lindsay. It's a two-parter. How do you decide which co-mans to audit, and how often are you auditing them before you do business with them once a year, as you mentioned?
Sure. Great question, James. So what we tend to do before we do any sort of business with a co-man is we do complete a qualification audit. And that audit is going to take a dive into all of the critical quality or food safety programs that supplier might have. Should we choose to proceed and continue to do business with them, we then take a risk-based approach to our audit frequency. So sometimes we may be on site maybe once a year. Others may be more or less frequent depending on, again, kind of the risk that we would assign them.
Great. So Susan, to draw the attention to the polls, we asked you guys what best describes you. And 40% of you say that you're a manufacturer, while 36% say you're a brand owner that works with a co-manufacturer, while 7 of you are co-mans, and then another 7 are broker, distributor, or suppliers, and then a small percentage, 2%, is other. And we also asked for the entrepreneurial brands, do you consider yourself an established brand or an entrepreneurial brand? And 95% of you consider yourself an established brand.
Wow.
Great. Well, helps us understand. So thank you. And thank you all for taking the poll.
Yeah, so another question that comes in from David, he wants some gruesome details. He wants to hear a horror story from each of you about working with either a CPG or a co-man, with whatever is applicable for you.
Example I can give. I actually have a couple examples. One was an entrepreneur who I started talking to after she had already identified a co-manufacturer, and I got involved with this. Her questions were after something had gone wrong, and as Alice, you had said earlier, what happened was she found a co-manufacturer, and this was for a small dog biscuit, like a high-end dog treat, and had given this co-man the formula and the procedure. And first couple of batches, Kevin, to your point, that honeymoon period, were fine. And then she gets this batch of burnt biscuits, and she said, it's not what I requested. I said, well, if your specification was around the formula and the process, but you didn't have a finished product specification, then you didn't specify that. Just because it usually turns out that way, you need to have the finished product specification and then let the manufacturer adjust what they need to. And when she got in touch with that co-man and said, well, these are burnt. And she said he was sort of dismissive and said, well, it's just dogs eating them. So she was looking, needless to say, for a new co-manufacturer. So that was one example. Alice, or Lindsay, do you have an example for us of a bit of a horror story you're willing to share?
So I'm thinking about what you just said, Susan, and it just echoes some things that have happened here in the past too. And that's why I emphasize that specification so much, because if you don't have a signed off and agreed upon spec, it pivots from day to day. You can make perfect stuff one day and the next day it's just not right. So it's important, and that can be a huge headache. And if you're trying to manage costs and your efficiencies, that's not the way to do it. So I agree with you, and it's a very similar story here.
Lindsay or Kevin, anything you're willing to share?
Sure. So I'll actually speak on one that we just had pretty recently. We were looking to actually switch co-mans, and we had reviewed a lot of their policies and found the policies that they had in place to be sufficient. So then we actually trialed our new process to set them up in TraceGains like suppliers and collect the documentation that we needed. And found out that they weren't really doing what they said they were. So there were a lot of issues with the documents that they did submit, or they just didn't have them at all. So we did end up going ahead and disqualifying them.
And when you're on a tight timeline, right, and that's the expectations it's going to work, that can definitely throw you off.
Yes.
Kevin, anything you're willing to share?
Oh, I think I have a bunch of stories, but probably similar theme to what we've heard so far. It's just dog food, guys, right? So it's all this level of dismissiveness, but no, I think we've got enough. It's already heart-wrenching to hear it.
Let's move on to something a little more pleasant.
So I do have another question. A couple of people have asked this same kind of question. So Kevin, this is coming to you. Erin wants to know, is there any kind of pass-through to obtain documents from a co-packer supplier? For instance, a brand company needs to still create nutrition, and it is sometimes a struggle to get nutrition per 100 grams. So could you maybe talk about some creative ways, or maybe just what TraceGains plans to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I heard the word pass-through there. So we're talking about a couple of things here. We do have the ability in our platform, when a manufacturer has that digital connection to their suppliers and they're managing all that regulatory docs and all that data, if they need to then send it to their customer. So that would be something that we would consider pass-through, and being able to share some of that data where your customers, they want to have that information from you and you're responsible for that as the manufacturer, but you need to obtain that from the supplier. So I think that's one common way where some people can accelerate that process, and it's a very pretty time-consuming way to do it. Unless you have some digital connections back and forth. So I think that's one easy way of handling the pass-through. I also heard something in there, Rachel, about 100 milligrams. Can you repeat that? What was that question there?
That was just her follow-up. She was giving an example if a brand company needed to create a nutrition, but it sometimes struggled to get the nutrition for just the 100 grams from the co-packer. So in some, they're trying to secure manufacturer's documentation bypassing the distributor.
Right.
So it's kind of a tricky situation. I know that a lot of you have asked about this, and there are some creative solutions for it, but it's probably an offline conversation. And so, Kevin, if you have anything more to add, but please do, but also know that we will be following up with each of you offline about this situation.
Sure, absolutely. I'm sure, make sure and look in the chat here as well. I'm sure a lot of people are responding, may have some experiences that they can share around that subject as well.
So I have a question from our CEO, Gary Nowacki, both directed towards Alice and Lindsay. You know, we use TGCon to get feedback from our customers. And so he wants to know if TraceGains adds a co-man specific search function to Market Hub, which is our sourcing directory inside of supplier management. What would you want to see from both the customer and the supplier side in that feature? Could you, Alice, speak to that first as the co-man? You're on mute. Sorry, you're on mute.
Sorry, that's about the third time. I think I get it. As far as using Market Hub and some added features, wow. I think right now it satisfies what we need. You know, before we were managing everything with spreadsheets and just knowledge from our brand owners about what they might want and who might be a supplier. This way with the Market Hub, you know, we can see immediately what's out there on a specific item, and many times find 2 or 3. We can see that there's an organic certificate or not and choose in that method. So I think it's pretty comprehensive right at the moment, but the next time I'm in there, I'll think of that question and make sure I get back to you.
Yeah, I would say as the brand owner, I think it would probably be helpful if there were a way to add tags or categories to the co-man somehow. Especially if I think about the situation where we're exploring a new co-man and we're really not sure where to go quite yet. It may be helpful to see what other kinds of products they may make and for what industry. For Smuckers, for example, a co-man who qualifies for human food may have some different requirements than a co-man who would qualify for pet food. So we may want to see some of the certifications that they may hold, like what organic, as Alice mentioned, as well as it would be helpful to see what third-party audit scheme they may be certified to, or again, like the kinds of products that they're currently making.
You know, Rachel, there's one other thing I was thinking about, and underutilized products out there. Maybe they're using most of the raw material, but there's one part of that ingredient is going to waste. Is there some innovation with that, and how could we possibly use that in our product for nutritional value?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Our keynote, Barbara, was actually talking about that upcycled ingredient movement. So that's fantastic to hear. I do have a couple more questions. We're going to get right up to the top of the hour. Jason wants to know, Lindsay, you mentioned managing co-mans like suppliers and TraceGains. Have you engaged in any co-man scorecarding, and what different data points would you use to do that?
Sure. So co-mans as suppliers within TraceGains is still very new for us. We're still very much in the trial phases of managing them in that way. As far as scorecarding them, we do currently have offline processes that manage that for us. So some of those key data points that we might use would be things like consumer complaints, non-conformances of the finished products, as well as just general testing samples and things like that.
If anyone would like to learn more about scorecarding, especially using TraceGains, Kevin Mccaffery is actually going to be talking on Thursday at 10 or 11:15 a.m. Mountain Time on leveraging data to drive supplier compliance and ROI. So more on that later. One last question, Lindsay, this is also for you. At what point in the life cycle of a new co-manufactured item do you add to TraceGains? For instance, do you wait until the item is manufactured, or would you begin the connection earlier than that?
Yeah, so it seems like there's some interest in that, and we're really hoping for some good things with this trial. Unfortunately, we don't have all of the kinks of it kind of ironed out quite yet. The few trials that we have run, we are asking for that before production of our product for those documents to have them in place. But it is still a very new thing for us that we're hoping will work out well and be beneficial for both us and the co-packers. We just don't quite have that process finalized and fully implemented yet.
Well, we look forward to hearing how it goes. So I want to thank Susan as our moderator and all of the contributors today for the great insights you shared. If you do have any questions, I encourage you to take down their contact information on the screen now and reach out to them. And just for the audience, we will be reaching out to talk more about specifically that pass-through aspect between your co-packers and their manufacturers. So thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you at the next session.
Thanks, everybody.